I'm 41, I'm having a midlife crisis. As you can see, there's no ponytail, there's no Ferrari outside, and there's no eye-opening age gap between me and my partner. I've discovered a different type of therapy to get me through. It makes me cry sometimes, it hurts sometimes, and it's made me consume a disturbing amount of custard. Now, this all kind of started for me in 2011. I ran my first half marathon. The following year I ran my first marathon. I did so dressed as a toilet. I was raising money for WaterAid, and I thought my friends wouldn't really be impressed enough to sponsor me unless I did something a bit different. I loved the experience. The crowds were very encouraging. I loved the interactions. I did get a bit bored towards the end of people shouting, "You look a bit flushed, mate." And the bigger irony, of course, was that towards the end I really, really did need the toilet. And the irony wasn't lost on me that I couldn't go when I was carrying a toilet. So I'm an outdoor journalist. I pestered a magazine called Outdoor Fitness. The editor there was Jonathan Manning. I wanted to write a story about it. He said, "Sure, but not this story. I want to send you on an ultra marathon and write about that instead." And I was like, oh, thanks. I couldn't really say no. Now, an ultra marathon, really, the definition is any distance above the classic marathon distance of 26.2 miles. So it could be 27 miles, it could be all the way up to, there's a race in New York called the Transcendence Race, I think. It's over 3,000 miles, round and round a block. Doesn't appeal to me directly, but... so he sent me on my first, let's see if this looks. My first ultra marathon is 69 miles over 2 days. This is the morning of the second day. I'm pretending I'm not in loads of agony. And I got through that, and actually, I absolutely loved it. I'll tell you more why in a second. What I was fascinated by was, I stood on the start line, I was full of fear, I had no idea whether I could complete it. I got to the end, it felt brilliant. Couldn't really walk for a few days, but, such is life. And of course, then you wonder, maybe I could do a bit more. So it wasn't long before I was doing my first 100-kilometre race. It wasn't long after that I was doing my first 100-mile race. That's in Bath, near where I live, down the Cotswolds Century. I probably stayed like that for quite a while at the end. But that's become my favourite sort of distance to race over, is 100 miles. I've done 600-mile races. I promise the shameless self-promotion will stop in a minute. There is a point to this. This is my favourite race, the 105-mile Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, which starts in France, goes through the mountains. It's 10,000 metres of climb, of ascent, which is more than Everest. It nips through Italy and Switzerland as well in the night. Which is this is my children, not some random kids I grabbed in the photo. But, this is one of the most magical moments of my life, if I'm honest. But that wasn't 100 miles. Once you've done that, how far can you go? I've done the Spine race twice, which covers the Pennine Way in winter. That's 268 miles. I liked that. Parts of my body didn't like it so much. I've done the Dragon's Back race across Wales. 5 days to travel down the sort of mountainous spine of Wales, which is an absolutely incredible experience. I've run in the Sahara Desert. This is Costa Rica. This race is called the Coastal Challenge. There's me. The only race I've done, I think, where sort of on the hazards you may experience includes crocodiles. In fact, at one point you have to stop and they take you on a boat across the river just to be sure. But beautiful scenery. I've done a Bob Graham round with my friend Charlie there, which is a sort of legendary fell running round in the Lake District, and a Charlie Ramsey round in Scotland, which is a similar challenge. And the most extreme sort of distance thing I've done is I ran our longest national trail, which is the Southwest Coast Path, 630 miles. So I was trying to set a record, so I had to run that in less than 11 days. It meant some 60 miles a day, which meant there wasn't much time for sleep, so it was about 3 hours sleep on average. But I know what you're thinking, so what? I'm just some middle-aged, middle-class, white Western guy, indulging himself, trying to prove I'm still young and strong, trying to prove my hair isn't falling out. But these experiences have taught me a few things. I think they're useful to me. They've taught me some things about the wider world. I'm going to share them. They might not be useful to you, but it's too late. You paid your money and you're sitting there. The first thing that fascinated me was these are easier things than they sound. They're easier than you think, because partly when I say I ran 100 miles,
I might have walked some bits, because sometimes it's too steep, sometimes you get a bit tired, you know, you just have to cover the distance. So you call it a foot race. So I did run long sections of these things, but you know, I hiked bits too. And when you're running, you're going pretty slowly, because if you go fast, you're going to burn out and crash, and it's all going to be a bit disastrous. So you're going slowly, and there are usually aid stations with lots and lots of cake and custard. Well, actually, not much custard, that's more of a personal thing, but lots of cake, and you can just sit there and have a good feed. So, you know, it's one big picnic, really, if you ignore some of the discomfort bits. What I love a lot is just being in nature, I suppose. This is the Lake District, a race called the Scarfell Sky Race. You know, I was lucky. I grew up with outdoorsy parents. We did lots of camping and hiking, and I just thought all kids grew up like that. And then at school and stuff, I realised it wasn't the case, and people didn't necessarily know these places. And you know, countless studies have showed we need nature. You know, we're animals really. Like Chris was saying at the beginning. You know, I'm unhappy. I know I'm unhappy if I'm away from these sorts of places too often. If I'm stuck in cars, stuck in cities, stuck in offices, I need to be in these places. You don't have to run 100 miles to experience these places, but that's just something I enjoy doing. We're all happier in nature. I may look like I'm malnourished, and both my mum and my mother-in-law, whenever I eat with them, they give me twice the size helping that everyone else gets. But I'm sort of healthier and fitter and stronger than ever, and that makes me happy too. And when I say one more interesting thing is when I say these are easier than they sound, what fascinates me is comparatively women are far better at these things than men. There are lots of reasons. Some are scientific, some are anecdotal. But you know, the classic case is your muscle-bound man who charges off the start line. Off he goes. He's one big hero, and he, you know, crashes and burns halfway through. And they'll often be, I hope this doesn't sound sexist, they'll often be, you know, maybe a slightly older person, maybe a female person will totter past them, you know, an hour or two later and get to the finish line, and they've succeeded. And there are lots of reasons why that might happen, but that's something that fascinates me about the sport. And that probably illustrates the point that so much of these, they're not about the size of your muscles, which is good for me because, as you can see, I haven't got any, but it's about the size of your willpower. You know, how much do you want to get to the end? And that's a fascinating thing, and it's amazing to learn that if you really, really want to do something, you know, you can get there. And at risk of falling into sort of, you know, sort of hippie cliches, if you think you can do something, then sometimes you can. Like if you're standing on the start line for 100 miles, of course you've got doubts, but the fact you're on the start line, you think it's possible. And if you think it's possible, it may well be. I think I've learned some things about humanity through doing these experiences. I'll talk about crying in a second. What's amazed me is more so than meeting impressive runners, is probably the support network around them and people who will give their kindness and generosity and time for these events, which are pretty selfish and self-indulgent really. But say the Spine Race, people volunteer for a whole week. They give up a week of their time. They go along and help. I know Clive has done something similar at the Dragon's Back Race. And that's an amazing, affecting feeling, and they do the smallest acts of kindness for you. On the Spine Race, they're not even involved in the event, but there's a farm way up above, north of Hadrian's Wall, and they have they insist you come in for sausage sandwiches and tea, and they will refuse any money from you, and they're doing that for every single person who goes through, and that's because they've been influenced by the trail angel culture in America on the long-distance trails there, where people leave gifts and try and help people, and they're just sort of sharing that kindness around. And then, of course, if you've been a recipient of that, hopefully, if you've got a similar example, a similar opportunity, you might share that kindness as well. And I think at the moment, when, you know, if we watch or read the news, if we follow the American president on Twitter, we can be a bit gloomy about the world, and just these small acts of kindness, you know, makes you feel better that mostly humans are good people and kind people. I've made some great friends as well. I think they're a different type of friend. A lot of them wouldn't know the names of my children or my birthday. They probably wouldn't apologise if they fart. And that's, you know, that's just the women. But if you phone them up and say, you know, in 3 days' time, can you meet me on the top of Helvellyn at 3 a.m. in a storm, and can you bring a really heavy bag full of chocolate and custard? They will, you know, and they're, you know, and I'd do the same for them. And that's a dependable type of friend, and they're good people to know. It's a good network of people. Right, yeah, I suppose I better discuss the crying thing. So when I ran the South West Coast Path, as I say, it was nearly 11 days of running.
only about 3 hours of sleep most nights because we were trying to break a record. So I got very, very, very tired towards the end, and I missed my children a lot. I felt guilty about being away. And towards the end, I discovered this amazing thing called the Power Sob. So in the morning, definitely the last 3 days, and it would only last 5 to 10 seconds, all right, maybe 15. I'd just burst into tears. I just wanted it to be over. And after that, though, I felt fantastic. And I've looked into it a bit, and there's a natural pain relief, sort of natural chemical that floods your body when you cry. There's a similar thing when you smile, actually. So when these races, when it's hurting, like earlier on, I try and force myself to smile, and there is a natural chemical reaction that comes out. And, you know, I think one of the things I love about these adventures is you really live in the moment. You're really living because you start with fear. You go through all these emotions. And in fact, there's an American runner, Ann Trayson, who has this wonderful quote that running 100 miles is like living a year in one day, and because you go through so much emotionally. And I know previously in my life I don't spend enough time in the current moment. I'm thinking about things I've got to do, things I haven't done, usually replying to emails in both cases, to be honest. But I'm not always thinking now, what am I doing now? And if you're not here now, present in the moment, you know, are you actually living almost? When I'm doing these things, often I'm in the moment, especially if I'm crying. And, you know, our lives can be, I don't mean this to sound patronising, at times my life has been safe and predictable, and these adventures make me feel alive, and that's mostly why I do them. Another good reason is the aid stations don't normally look like this, but you know you can really stuff your face with lots of cake and things when you run a lot, and that's great too. And just lastly, I think the mental side of things. I've got friends who've had mental health issues, friends who've had addiction issues, and running is kind of, you know, I wouldn't say save them, but it makes okay for them, like that's helped them through. My own life has been far luckier than most people's lives, but I've still had, you know, pressures and stresses. You know, I work in an industry that's in, you know, clear decline, print journalism. I'm raising a family, I'm self-employed, I'm supporting them. That's brought pressures and stresses, but throughout all that, running has helped me. It's given me some self-worth, a little bit of confidence. In fact, I think a few years ago, there's no way I could have been standing here talking, because there's nothing more terrifying than talking to a load of people, and now I just about can.